Let's take a look at identification evidence. We have 4 key things that we need to look at. First, the dictionary definition to see if it actually is identification evidence. If it is identification evidence, is it visual identification evidence? Or is it picture identification evidence? And if it is identification evidence, the application of the special warning contained in section 116. However, we're going to do something a little bit different with this class. Instead of assuming you know what the evidence is, we're going to show you how such evidence actually comes to be. So let's take a look. I'm sure you've all seen this scene before. Large sports stadium, people from opposing teams waiting outside the long line to get in. There's a bit of jostling going around, perhaps a little bit of alcohol being consumed, but in the end, a lot of energy is in the air. People are really eager to see their teams go to battle. Others, like James and Christy here, are really just fans of the sport and hold no strong feelings towards one team or the other. Of course, this isn't to say that their intentions have any bearing over the intentions of others. As we can see, a large brawl has already broken out between fans of the opposing teams. Fortunately for James and Christy, they managed to avoid the brawl. Good one, guys. However, what they saw is clearly of potential importance to the police, and indeed, the police officers take witness statements from them. James, the cooperative citizen that he is, tells the police officer everything that he saw, including a surprisingly detailed description of one of the key participants in the fight. He recalls his short buzz-cut hair, his deep blue eyes, his long nose, and his ruggedly handsome moustache, and also that he seemed kind of obese. This information, of course, is very useful to the police officer, and the officer asks James if he would be willing to pick out who he saw in a police lineup the next morning. And of course James agrees, being the cooperative young man that he is. The next morning, James and Christy attend the police station where the initial officer explains the situation to them. Assuming that it's a properly conducted parade, the officer will tell James that the person who he saw may or may not be in the subsequent police lineup, and that James should not feel compelled to make an identification if he's not sure. And the procedure itself is much like many of you would have seen in the movies. After identifying someone in the police lineup as the person involved in the brawl, James writes a police statement to the effect of what he just did, that is, his identification. In terms of how such evidence comes before the court, it's fairly straightforward. Assuming that the person that James identified is subsequently the person later charged with involvement in the brawl, and, in fact, James is giving evidence in the trial of that person, he will be giving evidence of the procedure he participated in and the identification that he made. So essentially, James would be giving evidence of the fact that he saw the brawl occur, the fact that he provided a description to the police officers of a person he saw involved in the brawl, the fact that he participated in a police lineup procedure, the fact that he identified someone in the police lineup procedure, and the fact that the person he identified is indeed the accused in this trial. Or assume it's not James that we're going to be adducing such evidence from. We could potentially elicit it from the police officer who conducted the investigation. In this case, the process would still be very much the same. The police officer would be giving evidence that James participated in a police lineup, that James identified a particular individual from the police lineup, and the fact that the person that James identified is indeed the accused in this trial. Just some things to keep in mind. What are the consequences if the conduct of the parade itself was improper? Do we have room for section 137? In terms of the need for a special caution contained in section 116, how specific does it have to be? And also, doesn't this sound a little bit like hearsay? In terms of picture identification evidence, The process is very similar. The major difference is that instead of watching a live parade containing several different people in several different foils, the identification is instead made sequentially from a series of photos in a book. Should James eventually identify one of the photos in the book as matching the description he provided to the police officer, the manner in which this evidence comes out in court is very much the same as it does with visual identification evidence. That is, both James and the police officer could potentially give an account of the process by which James made the identification. However, whilst these animations have been concerned with the process by which such evidence comes before the court, do not overlook the key preconditions required in the provisions themselves.